Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Tabletop Junkie stream. Just doing a little bit of a story time. Because I've been super busy. I haven't really been able to read up on anything to review lately, so I decided to do a story time of, I think, a successful Castle and Crusades one shot. Not that I haven't had many before, it's just, I don't know, just something to do to pass the time. So, we're going to dive into the story. The story begins in a world known as Alexandria. The name I've gotten from Final Fantasy IX because I'm a big supporter of the Kingdom of Alexandria. And so on and so forth. So, anyway, that's what I kind of wanted to name it after. It is a world with one sun and 3 moons. One moon either is showing or it's not. It just depends on where it is and the calendar year. So our adventure begins with 4 adventurers. An elf fighter, elf Rune Mark, elf rogue, and an orc fighter. Yeah, I know how that seems, okay? So we're going to get a little bit of context. The elf fighter actually came to this it's kind of like, it's called a town, but it's actually as big as a city. It's got well over 11,000 people in it. I may have to actually put this on pause. I do apologize. I think somebody is trying to gain access to my office, and I am not as to understanding sure as to the reason why. And I know that's long to get around to. It's just it says do not disturb on my door. I don't know what else. I don't know what else to do. So I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. I'm sorry. That's just lack of respect. That's all we can go with. Someone just doesn't have any respect for what I do. So anyway, moving on. Back to what that is. So the elf fighter came to this town known as Marshwood in search for adventure and possibly buy some wares. You know, just traveling, seeing the world. Well, when she arrives, she's a female elf. Let me see if I can get a small description of her real quick for you. Here we go. This female elf is pretty well decently armored. She carries around a tall pavis, which is kind of like a wall. It's not really tall. It's just not like tall in length. It's like something that, like, it's basically a walking wall of a shield. It's pretty big. It does have an encumbrance value that's pretty high. She wears studded leather while wielding a longsword. Wears no helmet. Might weigh her down. She is roughly 6'4", about 130 pounds or so. And she's 127 years old with black hair and hazel eyes. She came here in search to see what is currently going on. She's heard rumors. Very few ships travel here due to a plague. People in this town have been plagued by a disease that, for some reason, it can't figure out how it's transmitted. People who are exposed to the plague do not get the plague, so therefore, does raise some concerns. They're not sure how the victims of this plague works, if it's magically targeted, or if they are being magically targeted by a wizard, or anything of that sort. So she came here and searched for adventure, and she ends up at the tavern. Meanwhile, 3 other people, the elf Rune Mark, elf rogue, and Orc Fighter, actually do make their way to the town. So the elf Rune Mark makes it to this town and search for a very rare stone. The stone is known as a type of stone that is able, once magically endowed with his magic, he can actually eat the stone, or the stone will become soft and brittle where he can eat it, and will give, in one bite would give, one little sliver of the stone would give him supplements, nutritional supplements, which will actually save money and time for him buying actual rations, and would save him gold. He's roughly about 6 foot, 140 to 150 pounds. He's 121 years of age with brown hair and blue eyes. So yeah, he travels. He doesn't really wear. He does wear some armor, but barely. He does carry a short bow with him. Oh wait, that's not the elf Rune Mark. This is the elf Rune Mark. He wears leather armor, and also carries a short bow with him. Oh yeah, they both carry short bows. I thought he carried a staff too, but I guess he doesn't. So yeah, he is here. So he is here after doing his initiation studies as a Rune Mark. He is here trying to basically find this stone. He comes to this town and search for it, but then finds out that this town seems to be a dump. And we'll explain what he sees as it is. He is accompanied by an Orc Fighter. The Orc was actually a prisoner. Where they originally came from, he was prisoner of war. The Rune Mark saved him, and they managed to hop a ship and travel to this port city known as Marshwood. Meanwhile, during their travels, they actually found an elf rogue sitting in a barrel drinking all the ship's wine, and cannot figure out for the life of them where it happened. The rogue managed to sneak on and sneak off board successfully without anyone noticing that he was ever there, minus the Rune Mark and the fighter, the Orc Fighter. So they all did make it. Once they made it to Marshwood, they all made it to the tavern. As I said, Marshwood was riddled with a plague that left the streets pretty much dank, and I don't think dank is really the word. Let me see. Is dank the right word? Means bad. Well, it says disagreeable. Dank is disagreeably damp, musty, and typically cold. Well, that's generally the issue, because there's water everywhere. It's a port town. It's actually in a swamp. So yeah, it's already kind of like a crap hole just by that alone. However, most of the residents are, as they look around, most of the residents are either pale, very few are looking very healthy at all, or they actually look like they're dying, foaming at the mouth, and vomiting their guts everywhere. The town is actually very, even the clean streets, because it actually has 3 levels. The lower level, which is where the port is, the medium level, and the high level. All levels do not look very clean at all, and it is very, very crappy. As they arrive, they do discover like a simple glass of drink, which is normally like 5 copper pieces to 1 silver piece, is actually around 1 silver to 1 gold piece, and that there's a huge inflation rate going on here. They did check out some of the goods and wares before they decided to settle in for the night. And actually, the elf fighter did check out a few, as well as the other 3, separately before they actually met. And they actually realized the same thing. Once they got a room, they did realize that there was a huge inflation rate and nobody could figure out why. Meanwhile, as this does happen, people are literally around them dying, foaming at their mouth, and has choked on literally the foam. The elf rogue did discover the elf fighter and did try to take something off her, but she managed to turn around and basically hit him in the dead center of the head with the butt of her sword, knocking him down to the lower levels of the steps. Once they actually had a little bit of an exchange, each of them did buy a room. The Orc Fighter, Elf Rune Mark, and Elf Rogue did buy one room together, while the Elf Fighter by herself decided to actually get her own room, as that these guys were all male. And that way there's no funny business going on. She's well protected. She goes to the room and locks the door. While in the room, they each go to sleep. She ended up having these lucid, hellacious nightmares that actually woke her up 4 hours into her sleep. Without any type of form of short to long... In this game, there's really nothing about short to long rests. So, if you don't get 8 hours of sleep, you did not get proper sleep. So, unfortunately, she woke up fatigued. The other 3 gentlemen did wake up perfectly fine. And then they began investigating the area as to why everyone, men, women, and children, are all dying or very, very sick, next to death, or are getting sick. They did manage to make it to the mayor of the town, who stated that they did find that the plague, even if exposed to it, doesn't actually travel from person to person. They eventually did find out one of the major noblemen, who is an elf noble, actually did run the port. They did go down and talk to the port warden. The port warden told them that nobody has anything to gain from this plague, but they have everything to lose. While the port warden was telling them this, they noticed that the port warden, as well as the mayor, did look very sick. They did actually do some rolls to make sure that they did remember the features of how everyone looked. The rolls were pretty well successful for the most part. Sorry for the long pause. I had to check something. Alright, so they did find out that the mayor was on the top level next to the nobles of Marshwood, which really there's only one noble that owns their own textile company. However, with the plague going on, nobody is buying any of their textiles and everything is being purchased locally. However, due to the inflation rate and the lack of sale of goods and be able to export their goods, as most of the primary occupation of this town are a bunch of merchants, that business has ceased to a halt as well. Each time that they did go back and forth between the levels, they did notice that there was a shop known as Zadar's Ointment and Potion Emporium. It looked like a very well-known shop, so they did eventually go in and check out a few times, noticing that the shop owner, known as Lord Zadar, is actually pretty healthy looking. The elf fighter did eventually ask for something to help her sleep at night, just to see if maybe it could be poison, and that maybe that this guy had something to do with it. They did jump on this pretty easily when they find out that he is looking pretty healthy, which means for some reason the plague is not targeting him, which means he could be the caster of the plague, or he could be poisoning everybody. The substance of poison, actually, the subject of poison did actually come up several times, and with a few rolls they did not actually get close enough to know if it was poison or magical means at first. They did spend another day, of which the elf fighter, being fatigued, did actually take the sleeping medication. However, once again, she ended up having nightmares, unable to sleep very well, even with the sleeping. And it wasn't even a sleeping potion per se. The Lord Zadar was also a well-known alchemist and was able to make medicines, such as sleeping medicines from herbs and whatnot. So she took it, and the elf fighter still did not get any rest for that night, therefore moving from the fatigue to exhaustion, which she took a -4 to all her abilities. No matter what it was, she took a -4. She was completely useless and could not formulate a single thought. The player decided that her character was going to sit the rest of the session out and went to bed for the next 8 hours. Meanwhile, the other 3 did manage to discover the waterways were attached to the entire town, as that this is a swamp and would need a viable way to purify the water from a water source. They did go to the water source, which was being minorly manned due to the plague, and they did find out that there was poison in it. The Rune Mark, actually, being a very intelligent person, was able to pull out a small set and test the water himself with some herbs that he knows that would turn certain colors if a certain type of poison was actually presented. Of which then they did sneak to the shop to shopkeeper Lord Zadar and actually did speak with him. As they were speaking with him, the elf rogue did not approach, or nor did he ever go into the shop prior. Did sneak around back, break into Lord Zadar's area, and did find out that he had a journal of which had listed poisons. The poison that was generally listed is something that was majorly among common assassins. He took a page of the journal and did report it to the other two as they all made their escape. So once they didn't really make their escape. He made his escape, and basically the other two left. Once they actually went back to the tavern, they actually did find out that Lord Zadar, that the poison would change colors to the certain herbs, and that he was poisoning the waterway by non-magical means. So they figured, well, what's the worst that could happen? So while their elf fighter was currently out of commission, these three decided how hard is it to apprehend one person with, as far as they're concerned, no magical means, and that he could be an assassin versus anything else. So thinking that they had an easy target, they charged into the shop and began assaulting him. However, or at least trying to assault him. However, this is at this point we began to run initiative rolls. Oh, well, no, this was just before initiative rolls, and I allowed each one to do a scene. However, they did not surprise him at all, and he did get the jump on them. He ended up casting a spell. Let me pull up the spell here. Hang on, I'm going to pull up the spell because I can't remember the exact name. Yes. He did use a spell called Call Vermin, which allowed him to call, which basically was a spell range of 50 feet, where he was able to call vermin 1d, I believe it was for 1d6 rounds, of which I got a 6 on. Awesome. I also ended up getting a 3 on the dice for how many he summoned, which actually allowed the vermin, which was over 50, like a swarm of spiders, of over 15 spiders, which allowed the wizard to basically have the strength of one monster that it was equal to 1 hit dice. The spiders began wrapping the wizard into a cocoon, keeping him protected from the 3 group members, while the 3 group members began trying to attack the spiders and getting close. They quickly weaved webs around their feet, and they were almost unable to move. Being unable to move and being hindered, one did fault the elf rogue, decided to say, screw this, and left. As he left, he went to go get help from the elf fighter, but never made it back in time before the other two was subdued to near injuries that nearly killed him. They did, however, manage to escape with around 1 hit point each. That is it. The Orc Fighter and the Elf Rune Mark could not handle the wizard. They managed to clear out the shop, kill all the spiders with using the guards, the town guards. They did come in. Yeah, there you go, Spider Chris. Kill them all. So they did have the town guards help. They did come in, remove the spiders, the web, and they went to the cocoon, of which nobody saw the wizard leave. Once they went in there, the wizard was completely gone. As you can see that he made his escape out to the back of the cocoon when everyone was distracted. Moments later, they finally returned to the tavern where the elf rogue and the elf fighter was, just waking up from her sleep. So, overall, they did find out that Lord Zadar was the culprit of poisoning the entire freaking town. Meanwhile, they did not catch him, they did not do anything to him, and yes, he even got the drop on him, where they thought he was an assassin. It turned out he was a wizard that knows the form of alchemy, making him possibly just as smart, if not smarter, than the Rune Mark, which ended up pissing off the Rune Mark. However, like I said at the beginning, if there's disclaimers, yes, I have to identify these characters by race and class because names were never established. They might have been established off-screen among each other, but they did not share them with the GM. As to why this happened, we do not know. And it turns out I did make it like, hey, none of you guys told me your names, and they're like, oh, hey, we didn't come up with any. But in game, they said their characters knew each other to a certain degree, and then they also made the connection that they just met the elf fighter, and that none of them actually gave their names to her either. So they were like, well, for a one shot, this was pretty freaking awesome. If we do continue, they will love to see more. So there's possibly more on this as well in the near future, because there is another issue that they do find going on. At the end of this adventure, they did find out that a few days have passed, and people were actually feeling better, as that the Rune Mark did come up with some form of alchemy ability among the wizard stuff that would actually help purify the poisons out of them. Not easily. Some have died, some did not. But they have discovered another thing. That people are dying in their sleep, and they're not sure as to why, but may be connected to why the elf fighter has not been able to sleep in days. However, she did manage to get enough sleep this time around, and didn't have any dreams at all, and not as to sure why. Possibly another plague, who knows? Or it's Freddy Krueger. Hell. That is the end of my story time. I really don't have much else to say, other than Chris is sitting here in the audience making fun of me, so you can live with that. I just wanted to do the story time as to something I have to do. I had some changes made to my schedule, so I wanted to be like, well, what do I do today? This is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to promote this one shot that I've been doing, which was just a simple level 1 adventure. If we do continue, well, there will be more along the way. So, other than that, that is all I have. So, you guys have a great day. And thank you for listening to my Castle and Crusades story time.
Why don't you shut up?
You shut up.